it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We talk running, fitness, mental health, and so many more topics. As the founder of a youth running program, I approach all of our conversations with our youth athletes in mind and kind of have a focus around those things. But as you will see, we are finding that all of these topics relate to runners and people who like to move and do fitness or anything like that. Relates to everybody. Check it out. All right, so welcome back, everybody. It is me, Coach Tori, and I realized as a mental health and running podcast, we don't have that many episodes about mental health and running like explicitly. I feel like I go in one direction or the other direction or a different direction. So I decided to recruit some experts. So if everybody can welcome Darlene Taylor. I say everybody as if there's like the audience actually present, but hi, Darlene, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. And I really appreciate, anybody who is willing to give their time when I know, you're super busy, but I'm now looking at your like short bio. I can't even say short, your bio of all the things that you do, all that stuff. So before I butcher it, can you just kind of introduce yourself to everybody?
I never know where to start with these things.
It's the worst question.
I guess, yeah, it's so hard. I guess I am a clinical social worker. Well, was a clinical social worker for about 15, 20 years. And I've kind of pivoted into life coaching at this point. But yeah, so I have a mental health background. And so I'm doing coaching, life coaching, and I use a strengths perspective. I use the Clifton Strength Finder assessment as sort of the cornerstone of my coaching. And I really like to focus on helping people be the best version of themselves and really learning to lean into their strengths, and instead of focusing on trying to fix what's wrong with them, but instead focusing on how to really build up what's right with them and use all of the things the ways that we're naturally wired to become the best versions of ourselves. And so that's kind of what my focus has been. I recently wrote a book on co-parenting. And so part of my coaching business now is sort of looking at how to co-parent using your strengths, and how to co-parent after divorce, and try to do that in a way that's really healthy for your kids. So that's my, I guess, professional background. And then my personal background is I've been an athlete my whole life. I ran track in college. I was a sprinter, so I was kind of allergic to endurance events. as a lot of sprinters are, but I have grown to appreciate and love running the longer distances. And so now, as I'm many years out of college, I have kind of turned into an obstacle course athlete, and so I do OCR races, Spartans, and Tough Mudders, and things like that. And those have become sort of my my passion in tennis. So that's kind of me.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you did obstacle course racing. It's always like in the back of my mind is like, is that something I would want to do? What made you want to, you just were like, this seems like a fun idea?
Like I said, I was a sprinter. And so, I love running. I love competing. But I'm also a personal trainer. I didn't include that. So I'm a personal trainer and a nutrition coach. And so I like to lift heavy things. I like to, that the strength part of it. And when I lived in Cincinnati, I recently moved to LA from Cincinnati. And when I lived in Cincinnati, one of my very best friends is an avid runner, has been a marathoner her whole life, and she was always trying to get me to run with her, and I'm like, no, I'm not running I am not even running a 5K. No, I don't want to do it. And so and then I was always trying to get her to do things, to lift with me and go work out with me, and she was like, no. And I was like, let's find something that we can do together. And so I finally got her a little bit in the gym, and she convinced me to do a couple 5Ks. And so we were like, let's try to find something that we can really do together. And so we started exploring, and I'm like, what do you think of an obstacle course race? And so we looked at the Spartan sprint, which is 3 miles and 20 obstacles. And I was like, it's got some running for you. It's got some like doing hard stuff parts for me. I think this would be a really great thing to do. And we drove from Cincinnati to Spartanburg, South Carolina, kind of ironically that was our first race, was in Spartanburg. And we were at the starting line, and we're all like just pumped up, and I looked at her and she looked at me, and we knew like this is going to be our thing. And we had such a good time. And it was just, yeah, it's a really, really cool experience. So that was at the end of 2018. And so I don't know, 30 or 35 races in at this point.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. I need to add that to my list of like more sooner goals, not just like, oh, eventually someday I'll get to it, right?
100%.
Uh, all right. So we found each other because my main question really was to have someone explain the ways like endurance sports. I was obviously thinking long distance running, but I think it can
Mhm.
generalize to
Yeah.
endurance sports, improve mental health. Cause I think it's one of those things that I know I've talked about it too, is like, we kind of just know like you do something healthy, it's good for all of you, including your brain. But then when someone's like, can you explain like why? And you're like, it's just good for you. You know what I mean? I feel like that's like I get stumped on that question because I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Right.
I know it's really good for you. So I'm like, help me out here. Explain why, especially those endurance sports, can improve mental health.
Yes, I call exercise nature's antidepressant. I mean, it really does chemically kind of alter your brain. The endorphins are released anytime you do, exercise, especially endurance exercise. And these are natural mood enhancers, and they're also natural painkillers, ironically. So it's just it improves every part of your health doing this. Um, excuse me. And it also, so when you're doing endurance exercise, your body is sort of flooded with these chemicals, with these endorphins, different chemicals, and that works in the short term and in the long term to improve your overall mental health. The other thing that it does is really reduces your body stress hormones, mainly cortisol. And cortisol is like our main stress hormone. And so endurance exercise really reduces that. So that's probably, I think in this day and age, with the amount of stress that so many of us are under, that's probably one of the biggest benefits of endurance exercise is really that reduction of the stress hormones. And then on the other piece of it, I think this is sort of the intangibles. It's not, you can't really measure it with any sort of anything biologically, but it really, I believe, like changes the way that you view yourself. It changes your self-confidence. It kind of improves your sense of like self-efficacy, the fact that you can do something, you can do hard things, you can push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And as a personal trainer, that was one of my favorite things to do working with clients, is showing them that they can do things that they didn't think that they were able to do, because that sort of confidence just spills over to every other area of their life. And it's just, that just really builds them up, and I think really, really helps improve that just their overall mental well-being. So
Yeah. Okay. That is a great explanation. Of course, you cover kind of all areas of it. And so kind of with that, and I know I kind of proposed this question of like, I'm sure you've seen people talk about like running is therapy or running is their therapy. But
mhm.
also I wanted to ask you because you're a sprinter and I always wished I was and never was. Do people who run short distances, like, do you still have that same kind of thought of like using running that way, or is it more of like a long distance person thing? Do you think?
Um, I think so. I think in the way that you're thinking about it, I think maybe that's more of an endurance thing, a long distance thing. But I think as a sprinter, we do have to do some endurance to help us be better sprinters. So there is that component of our training, but I think it's just sort of that the whole gamut of things that we have to do to train to be a good sprinter. There is some endurance work, but there's some, strength training that we have to do and all of these other things. And so I think all of that together does really begin to feel like therapy. I love any kind of exercise as therapy. And me being, my friend Janine calls me the non-runner. And I really kind of think of myself like that a little bit, but it's been interesting because as I have incorporated more and more distance running into my exercise routine and into the things that I do, I found that runner's high. I have found those spaces and places where it really does feel like therapy, where the first day that I woke up and stuff was going on and I'm like, feel like I need to run. And I was like, what am I saying? I texted Janine and I was like, I think I need to go for a run. And she's like, I'm marking this down. I'm marking this day down. But it did really begin to feel like, okay, I can, everything slows down. I think for a lot of people, and everything sort of, all the noise falls away and everything kind of clears out, and whatever's going on, whatever you need to think about or whatever you need to not think about just kind of goes away. And you just sort of, in my opinion, kind of reach this very zen sort of space. And so I think that's the way I feel when I think about running being my therapy, is just being able to let everything go.
Yeah. Well, and like even just with your answer to your last question, kind of explaining like the physiology of it too, like it totally makes sense, like what it's actually doing to our bodies and just like again, our minds and everything. So yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And you are, it sounds like kind of like a social runner, right? Like you
Yes.
pick people to run with.
Yes.
Like how do you think the social component helps? Or like do people who run on their own, do you think like that changes things? I know I didn't say I was gonna ask you this, but
That's okay. No, I do. I think there's a huge social component, and I don't necessarily think for everyone. I do. I have a lot of friends who are runners, and I think some of them prefer to run alone, and I think that's sort of their therapy time to get away from the world and get away from everything. But a lot of them really run, and do really appreciate that social component. There's a lot of there's a lot of bonding in the running community. I'm sure you know that you're an avid runner, so there's a lot of bonding there. And I think that that's a huge, for me, um, I really like the social connection of being pushed, people helping you kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone. And whether not even just kind of that physically, Janine, like I said, my friend Janine is a great runner, and so I'm trying to keep up with her. And so there's that sort of competition piece of it, but I also just think the camaraderie of it, the being able to run with others, I think there's a huge social component of that. And moving, like I said, I recently moved to California from Ohio, and that was one of the things that I searched for when I was trying to find community, and that was Janine's suggestion. She's like, what about a running group? And I was like, you know what, like, as much as I don't really love running, that's probably a really good place to start. And it was. I met some really great people doing that. So I think that there are a lot of benefits from it.
yeah, I know. It is like anyone who knows me knows I'm like obsessed with the running community, whether it's like actually meeting in person, those running groups, or just like being able to find runners kind of in any place, online or
Yes.
whatever. So I feel like we always kind of find each other, which is nice.
Yes, it
Um,
is nice.
yeah. So with the people you work with, especially like the life coaching, I feel like you may have kind of said this when you were introducing yourself at least. Do you often, maybe often's the wrong word, but do you suggest like if people who are not active who come to you to kind of seek help on different ends of things? I am like butchering this question because I'm like trying to find it in the air, right? As you can see me using my hands. But do you suggest like some kind of physical activity? Like movement, like
100%.
does that always pretty much for anybody that's going to help them?
100%. That is,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm a personal trainer, and one of the reasons that I wanted to shift away from being a therapist is because I wanted to be able to really rope in all of my different areas of expertise. Because I really think when you talk about working with people, you really need to have a more holistic approach. And our mental health is very much connected to what we do with our bodies physically, what we put in our bodies, how we move our bodies or don't move our bodies, how much sleep we're getting. All of those things are affected, and all those things affect our mental health and vice versa. So that is definitely part of any plan. I tell everybody in the world, probably one of the best things that you can do is get up and get outside and walk for 30 minutes every day. Doesn't have to be fast. You don't have to be like, just that the base thing that does when we're talking about that stress hormone cortisol, lowers your cortisol level immediately. And so I tell everybody, as much as you can, it's great to do it first thing in the morning, but anytime, if you can get 20 minutes, even if you can't, the longer the better. But if you've got 20 minutes to just get outside and walk, that is one of the best things that you can do. But I definitely think moving your body should be a part of anyone's kind of mental health package, I guess, or whatever you do, a mental health regimen. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my words today
I
too.
probably took them
But
over here, right?
but yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it is, I always tell people, move your body, drink your water, get your sleep. Those are three, if you don't even know where to start, those are three things that you can start. Walk for 20 minutes, make sure you're getting close to 8 hours of sleep, and drink your water. And those, I think those are just really, really important things to do. So yeah, moving is a huge piece of, I think, mental health. The flip side of that, though, is being too reliant on exercise and running as your only way to cope with stress. that's the downside. And I don't know if we were going to talk about that, but that's the side, and I say that, I guess it came up because that's the part that I struggle with. Because
Hmm.
if you're someone who really uses exercise or running as your main go-to stress reliever, if something's going wrong, I'm going for, whatever. If you get injured, that's gone. And now you're
Right.
dealing with another huge stressor in your life and no way at all to deal with it. You have, if that can't be your only stress reliever. And that happened to me. I was, like I said, I was very, very active, and exercise was my only stress relief, really. And then I ruptured my Achilles, and I was non-weight bearing for 12 weeks. I
Oh my
couldn't do
gosh.
anything. And it was really, really rough. And that was when I realized, okay, I need to have another coping mechanism. You can't just rely on exercise and running as a coping mechanism, because there will be times that that's not available to you. And so that's the part where balance is really important.
Yeah, well, it's like you were reading my mind because I was just looking at my notes and I was like, yes, we need to get to, unfortunately, like the negative side too, right? Um, and how, I mean, I don't know if it's like it just kind of is personality wise or what it is, but like how do we get there? Because I totally get what you're saying. And I have seen people who their only coping strategy is I go for a run, or they
Mhm.
really embrace that like running is therapy. I don't need a therapist, when it's like, oh, but maybe
Yes,
you might, right? But then
but
it's
maybe,
like,
yeah.
right. And it's like, yes, you need that balance, but then it's like also, okay, you want to train for a marathon. It's also hard to
Mhm.
have that balance for however many months you're training. So how do we kind of
Right.
get to that point where like, oh, we've gone too far?
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, and I think that can happen too. Every all good thing, every good thing can be a bad thing in excess. I mean, anything in excess, I think,
Yeah.
is a problem. Or can I shouldn't say is completely, but can be a problem.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think balance is something that I have struggled with in my life. So I think it's kind of a hard question for me to answer too.
Yeah.
Um, because, especially because when you feel like something is, such a good coping mechanism for you, and it's really worked for you, it's hard to feel like you need anything else. But I think, going through my injury was the thing that helped me realize, okay, I can't rely solely on this thing. And so I had to kind of look around and say, okay, what other ways, what other things am I doing to take care of myself? And frankly, when you're talking about exercise, specifically when you're talking about running, um, it's hard on your body, hard on your joints, and especially I'm, getting up there in years. Once you pass 40, your body starts doing some different things. And your body's not necessarily so happy with you running miles and miles and miles. And so that's the other piece of it too, is you really have to start to listen to your body and listen to what you need. And okay, yes, I do need a coping mechanism, but maybe I need to be able to balance this with, maybe walking instead of running, or just, doing something else. As you said, therapy is, there's nothing really that kind of can replace actual therapy. So, and I that as a therapist, I believe that everyone should have access to, and should be able to take advantage of therapy. I think it's just a wonderful tool for everyone to have at some point in their lives, or all the time. But yeah, so I don't know that I really necessarily answered that question, but I just think it's important to figure out, what else brings you joy, what else brings you peace, what else can kind of quiet the storm that's going on in your head, and be able to, as much as you may love running or endurance or working out, be able to balance that, and not only go to that as your main coping mechanism, and use other things before you're in a place where you don't have a choice and you have to find something else.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Like, is there a way to know before you're forced to, right? Like before you
Right.
rupture your Achilles, or before, you have complete burnout or something. Like, I guess maybe just a fail safe is like, you always have to have some other elements of yourself, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, I'm a runner, but I'm a runner and I also do
Yes.
something else,
Yeah.
whatever that could be.
Right.
Yeah, like, this is how bad I'm at this because I can't think of something else, but
Yeah, and I think you just thinking, kind of asking yourself, what else brings me joy? What else brings me peace? Those kinds of things. Asking yourself those questions, like you said, before you have to. And maybe just sitting down and thinking about, what would I do if I couldn't run? And are you, if somebody asks you that question, are you gripped with panic? If you're gripped with panic, that might be a sign that you might need to think about, having something else as your coping mechanism. And then also, making sure that you give yourself days off. Again, with the whole excess of anything can be a problem, is just like, making sure when you're training, doing any sort of training, because running is training. And so when you're doing any sort of thing like that, making sure that you build in days where you don't run. I don't run, I don't run 2 days a week, and maybe I knit, or, whatever. But
Yeah.
you're just, so that you're doing something else. I think that part will, when you're trying to think about just balancing what's good for your body, oftentimes that can maybe help you figure out how to come up with another coping mechanism and kind of help you balance what's good for your mind too.
Yeah. No, that is great, because I know I always like remember that. I can't say always. I sometimes remember that. And then, I go back and then I'm like, oh no, wait, yeah, I need to have other things I do. And then, so I think that can be really hard for a lot of us to
Yeah,
do that. And especially when, like,
it is.
you don't have time to, like, I'm a runner and I do yoga and I also knit. And it's like, who has the
Yes.
time to do that on top of like a job and a family and,
Yeah.
like all kinds of
Yes.
stuff.
I know. That's me with yoga. I'm always like, I need to find time for yoga. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to fit it in.
I know
But
the amount of times I'm like, I'll just do like my core exercises while I'm watching TV at night. And then it's like, but the couch, like,
so comfy.
right. Like, oh, it is so hard to balance things.
It is
Um,
very hard.
I want to talk to you a little bit about running. Because I feel like it's actually been a little bit since I've asked people like my really generic running questions. But I feel like I don't have a lot of sprinters on here either. So, because like I know, especially as like a distance person, we often are like, okay, this was my best race, and you can like replay all of that in your head, and this was my worst
Hmm.
race because I didn't fuel, I didn't have my head in the right place, like all those things.
Right.
Do you have, well, I know you've done like other things now too, but do you have like race you learned the most, worst race ever, best race ever? Like, do you have those in your head?
Absolutely. I mean, I think mine are a little different because they're all my OCRs, and so I
Okay.
am doing, I am running, but then they're broken up with the obstacles in between. But definitely, so I mean, I definitely think that, probably I would say my some of my best races were the shorter ones. No, that's it's no surprise, the 5Ks. But yeah, I had one where I nailed every obstacle, but because I don't run competitively, I run them open. So I run them for fun, and I kind of run them for, against me, kind of me against me. And
Yeah.
so because I'm not a distance runner, I kind of run walk most of them, right? But the shorter ones, I really I was wanting to maybe start running those competitively. So I was like, I need to be able to run this whole thing and at a decent pace. And so I've had a few races where I have run the whole thing, in between the obstacles, and felt really good when I was done, and really felt like I was, able to kind of dial in. And I've learned, so there's a sprint, which is 3 miles and 20 obstacles, a super, which is 6 miles and 25 obstacles, and a beast, which is 13.1 miles and 30 obstacles. And so what I have learned, for me, I probably have learned the most from the beasts, because I'm not, my body's not really used to endurance, and I don't probably train nearly as much as I should. So I just kind of show up and I'm like, I'm going to do it. But I've learned a lot about, what my body needs for fuel. And really, for me, the mental aspect of it, I know that when I get to about mile 6 or 7, my mind is done and I want to be done. And if I haven't fueled correctly, and I usually bring food with me on those longer ones, and if I know that I have to eat before I feel like I need to eat, because if I get hungry, then it's over and it's bad. And I know that there's this point at about mile 6 or 7 where I'm kind of fighting with myself, because I just want to be done. I just want to quit. I'm like, I don't, why am I here? It's hot. I'm in the middle of the woods. I don't want to be doing this. I'm probably going up a hill somewhere. I don't even want to do this. But being able to get past that hump, and I think those are the races that I've learned a lot. And I've had a couple of beasts where, especially lately, where I realize I'm at like mile 8 or 10, and I realize that I've never really gotten to that place where I just want to die and quit. I'm like, oh, this is like, okay, like my body's like, okay, we're used to this, we're doing this. And so I've had a few of those. But yeah, that's the kind of the cool thing about those races, is because each venue is so different, that each race is so different. Some of them are really flat, some of them have a ton of elevation, the weather can be different. And so, you show up and you don't really kind of know what you're getting into. So it's always going to be a different challenge, which I think is one of the things that I like about it.
Sorry, my air conditioner turned on and I thought I had turned the entire system off, and here we are. So hopefully it doesn't like make too much noise, but yeah, and that's why I need to try one of these races, because they do sound so cool. Do you ever get like psyched out about certain obstacles? Like, I don't know if you know some of the obstacles ahead of time, but are you like, oh no, it's gonna be
Yes,
the thing you
there
gotta
are
climb over and
definitely,
stuff?
yes, there are definitely obstacles that I get psyched out about. I think I've done enough races now where I pretty much know they kind of have this sort of standard obstacles at each distance. But you don't know what order you're going to find them. And so that's what is challenging too, because if they have some of the really, really tough ones in your last 2 or 3 miles and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. So yeah, there's definitely getting psyched out about that, and getting psyched out, sometimes for me, getting psyched out is about the distance and about the running, because I do want to, it's a race. I do want to run, and I do want to be able to do that. And it's it can get really quiet in those woods running. And I'm just like, and you're trying to push yourself, and it's just like, and I want to run, but I also am like, I'm trying to conserve my energy because I want to do well on the obstacles too. And so it's this sort of fight of like, how much energy, how do I balance that energy? And I'm sure you've probably had that too when you're doing a road race, of just like, how, don't want to go out too fast, or, whatever, all those things. So it's a lot of balancing that. But yeah, like I said, my friend Janine that I run with, she is a person who likes to know what the course is going to be. So she looks at the map and she likes to know exactly, where each of the obstacles. I don't want to know. I just want to show up and just have it be a surprise. And so I had to tell her on the course, I'm like, don't tell me when we're halfway. I don't even want to know. Like, I just keep going, because I know I have to get to the end. So it doesn't even matter if we're halfway or 3/4 of the way. I just want to keep going. And she's like, okay, I need to know. And she's like, nope, I need to know that at this point, I've only got we're halfway done and we've only got so much to go. So it's interesting to see the way different people approach races, and approach, how tough the races are.
I was gonna say, I love your approach to it. Not only, like, I was thinking back to when you were saying, like, I run them for me and like against myself, which I think is always so great. And we always talk about how like that's really how you have to think about running, especially.
Right.
But then like I know I would be like your friend Janine, and I would be like, I need to know exactly. But then I also at mile 1, I'd be stressing about whatever obstacles at mile 13. And it's like the amount of energy you're now using just stressing about that. So like I would like to be the kind of person who's just like, I'm running it, right? So like
Yeah.
I'll get there when I
Right.
get there.
Yep, I'm here, one foot in front of the other. I've learned a lot about myself on these courses. I really have, and I've learned a lot about myself on the courses in between the obstacles. I mean, I think you learn something about yourself in the obstacles, but for me, I learned the most about myself on the running part, especially in the beast, because there's only 30 obstacles, but there's 13 miles, and so that means there's going to be long stretches where there are no obstacles, and I run the races for the obstacles. So that's my challenging part. For Janine, I think the challenge is the obstacles when we get to the obstacles, but the running, that she's just on autopilot. And for me, that's when I really have to like, okay, you can do this, you got this. And I'm kind of like talking myself into like having a runner's mentality, and that's my shift. And so that's where I've really been able, I think I've grown as an OCR athlete, because I think that I've become better at being able to get in the right mindset to run and to really enjoy it. And I have gotten to the point where I really do enjoy, sometimes the longer runs.
Okay, what is the worst obstacle? Just because now I'm like so curious about all these obstacle course races
See, that's
for
what's
you.
interesting, because for me, yeah, that's what's interesting. I was going to say, because it's really about what is a challenge for you. there's a lot of hanging obstacles like monkey bars and different types of monkey bars that move. And so for people, who don't have a whole lot of upper body strength, that can be a challenge. There's a lot of obstacles that are very high. So if you have a fear of heights, those can be really challenging for people. I have a fear of water. I don't swim and I don't like water and I don't like my head submerged underwater. And there's a dunk wall at every race. And so for me, that's my toughest obstacle. There's an inflatable wall that's probably 18 inches thick, and it's, I don't know, maybe like a foot to 2 feet in this muddy water, and you have to go under the muddy water and come up the other side after you sort of traverse 2 or 3 hills of rolling mud. So you're just a muddy mess, and then you get to this dunk wall and you have to go under this dunk wall. And never had a panic attack in my life until I did this race, and I'm at this dunk wall and I'm like, I don't want to quit because that's not an option. I don't want to not do it because that's not an option, but I'm like, I cannot bring myself to go under this wall. And so that's my hardest obstacle. But for Janine, she really she's shorter than I am. And so I think her challenge is really the hanging obstacles because she's afraid of like dropping and hurting herself when if she doesn't make it across the monkey bars and falling off the monkey bars. So yeah, I think it's different for everyone.
My heart is still racing from you describing the dunk wall. That sounds like an actual nightmare. Oh my gosh.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. So because like I'm picturing myself and I would be the person who's like, nope, I'm done. Yeah, like actually done, never again. How do you get yourself to do it every time? Like I know you obviously like probably can be like, I survived last time, but like that doesn't really make it easier, does it?
It doesn't. Honestly, this is the thing that I love most about Spartan in particular. Most of my races have been Spartan. There are a lot of different companies that do OCRs. It's the community. When we talk about a running community, it is the Spartan community because almost every time I have gone under the wall, it's been because someone has held my hand or grabbed me in a hug and pulled me under the wall. People that I've just met at the dunk wall, seeing me have a panic attack, one of them will go under and hold and grab my hand underneath the wall, and Janine will be on this side and they will pull me / push me under the wall. I mean, literally people getting you under the wall. But that's the cool thing about doing running Spartan is open because people help you. I remember being on this A-frame. So it's this big, huge A-frame thing, and it's a cargo net on this A-frame, and it's very tall. It's very scary for people who don't like heights. I don't mind heights, and I'm climbing up, and I was just always toward the end, and so I'm going, and this woman is at the top, and she is shaking like a leaf, and she's like, I can't go. She didn't want to go back, but she didn't want to go over. She was almost at the top, and so I kind of sat there and talked her over, and she's with a partner, and somebody was helping her, and we kind of helped her get up over it. And she came to find me after the race and was like, thank you so much. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to get over it. And to me, it was just sort of the paying it forward of all the people who helped me at the dunk wall over time. But I've made some really great friends at the dunk wall, like some really great like Spartan sister friends at the dunk wall. And I did have one race at the end of 2019. And I was actually running the race by myself, which I don't usually do. I usually run with at least one friend or a group. But I got to the dunk wall, and I assumed because at every other dunk wall that I was going to be able to find someone that was going to help me, and no one was there to help me. And so I'm standing in this muddy water, staring at this dunk wall, literally crying because I don't want to quit and I don't want to not do it, but I don't know how I'm going to get myself under it. And it was my last race of the year. And I'm not really sure how I did it, but I made myself go under it by myself. And that was probably my biggest win ever on a Spartan course. So.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's so nice too, that like there is such great community that you're able to pay it forward to people too. But
it's really cool. That's one of the things that's one of the things I miss most about when 2020 happened and all of our races got canceled. I had a whole a whole schedule lined up for the year of races that I plan to do. And I missed racing, but I missed the community even more. Like, I think that was the thing. I have friends, you know, because I travel to races across the country. So I've got people that I get to see when I go east. And I just really missed seeing everybody and missed being out on the courses with people and you just, you know, making friends, and it's great.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. All right. I'm like almost back into being sold on the idea, but that dunk
Yeah,
wall
you got to do
really
it.
put some brakes on it for me. I don't know.
You got to do
I'm
it. It's
considering
worth it.
still.
It's worth it.
Yeah. All right.
Do you ever talk to people about, how do you feel? I'm going to ask you a question. Do you run races for the medals? Do you really like getting the medals? Or is
It's
that like just a whatever part of the races to you?
It's just the whatever part. I mean, there's definitely been
Okay.
races even that like they're like, do you want a medal or a hat? And I'm like, I don't want either. Or like, maybe I'll take the hat because it's cold. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like I don't have I know Knox people who do, but like I don't have like the medals hanging on the walls or anything.
Okay.
I think my son dropped like 4 of them into like our air conditioner or something. So like, yeah, what are those things called? The vents? Yeah, he dropped a few in the vents.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's
so like,
me. You can get me to do any race if the medal's cool enough.
yeah, I know. Well, it's like such a thing. And I didn't realize it was such a thing either until I'm like, oh
Oh,
my God, I'm holding these things. I'm like, the amount of money they spent on this medal, like this, and it's like, that is the draw, right?
yes. I do kind of call myself a medal whore a little bit.
So do you have your medals on some kind of display, something, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep, of course.
Oh yeah. And Janine knows it too. She's like trying to get me to do a race. She's like, there's a really cool medal. So like, yeah, I literally will have to, if it's a really cool medal, I really have to think about it. It's got to be really, really terrible for me to say no if the medal's super cool.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't race so much. I'm trying to get back into like that side of it, but it was kind of always just like, don't have the time, the money, the commitment to training. So it's like, you're constantly like, I'll train for this.
Right.
I won't, so.
Right.
I'm getting back into it, but yeah, no medals. Maybe I'll start collecting them again. But I feel like we went through all of my questions that I had. But where can people find you for all of the things that you do? And I don't know if we got the name of your book. I just know that you wrote a book.
Oh, yes. No, I don't think I said it. So the book is called It's Not About Us, a co-parenting survival guide to taking the high road. And it's about co-parenting after divorce in a way that's really healthy for your kids. It's kind of a memoir and kind of also a self-help book. I'm divorced. My daughter's 16 now, and we moved. That was why we moved. We moved from Ohio to California about 4 years ago because her dad, my ex-husband, got a job out here, and he asked me to move so that we could keep her close to both of us. Even though I was, pretty entrenched in my life and my work and my community in Cincinnati, but I thought that, it was best for Sammy, our daughter, to have both of us in her life consistently. So we made the move. Yeah, so the book is really about all of the lessons that I learned on our journey of co-parenting and how we got to a space where we co-parent really well and where I would even consider moving across the country. So that's the book. And my website is darlenetaylor.com, and then that's got information about the book. And like I said, I do co-parenting coaching and life coaching and speaking engagements and all that good stuff. And so all that information is on the website.
And do you have your next race planned in case anybody on here is an obstacle course racer and also is going to be there? Do you have a race?
Do.
Of course.
I do. Yes. I actually have not done an obstacle course race yet this year. I haven't raced at all in 2023. So this will be my first race weekend actually. So Spartan has a weekend coming up in Cincinnati, Ohio, June 10th, that weekend, 9th, 10th, 11th, I think is, and so it's actually called a trifecta weekend. So I mentioned the 3 different distances. So if you do all 3 of those races in a year, that's called a trifecta. And so this particular weekend, they actually are offering all 3 races in one weekend. And so you can so they have the Beast, which is the 13-mile 30 obstacle on Saturday, the Super, which is the 6-mile 25 obstacle on Sunday morning, and then the Sprint, which is 3 miles 20 obstacles on Sunday afternoon. So you get a finisher medal for doing all 3 of them, and then you actually get another medal that says trifecta weekend finisher if you do all 3 of the races in the weekend. So that's my goal for that weekend, is to do a trifecta weekend, even though I haven't raced it all this year. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's my goal for this weekend. But yeah, that's June.
I'll say, as soon as you said there's an extra medal, I was like, oh, she's doing all of them.
I'm so doing it.
Oh my gosh, good luck.
The only thing that would, yeah, that's the only thing that would make me do 3 races in a weekend is an extra medal.
That sounds intense. Wow.
A little intense.
I'm sure you have to take a lot of time to kind of recover after that.
Yeah, the recovery is big. And that was my the first year I did trifectas, I didn't do a trifecta weekend. And so I guess, and then 2020 was nothing. And so 2021, I think, was my first trifecta weekend. And that was really interesting to, talking about, being a runner and recovering. I was calling Janine, like, what do I do after Saturday? Because I was like, I don't know if my body's going to do anything tomorrow. Like, I can't imagine getting up and running more and doing more obstacles. And so she was kind of giving me some tips about what I needed to eat and, and all of those things to kind of help my body recover. So yeah, the learning curve has been interesting, but it's fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that sounds fun. Okay. Well, good luck on that weekend. Thank you so much for sharing all of your info today. I really loved hearing just like not only all of your tips and expertise, but also just about your running and all the cool things that you've done. It's really cool.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I love running, and I've made my daughter run with me a couple times. She's done a couple 5Ks with me, and she did a Spartan sprint with me, and kind of kicking and screaming, dragged her to the start line. And right when we were about to finish, she was like, I could do more. Like, I could go a little bit longer. And she complained the whole race, but she's like, I could go a little bit longer. And so I was like, I'm going to turn you into a runner sooner or later, but she's not convinced on how great it is. So
yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen.
I just want to thank Darlene again for coming on the podcast. It was so fun talking with her. Her energy is amazing, if you couldn't tell. Make sure you check out the links in the show notes to be able to find her life coaching business and kind of all things about her. If you are an obstacle course racer, definitely make sure you look for her there. It sounds so fun. I'm hoping I can get into that in the next year or so because it sounds very, very cool. Yeah, and again, just thank you so much. I always appreciate when there are people who are willing to take the time to talk with us and really share some important information. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all the things that you can do for a podcast that you enjoy listening to. Make sure you check out social media, our website, any of those things. If you have questions, comments, interview requests, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.